So this is one of my favorite case studies. As I was working with Deere quite a few years ago, I was their customer looking for them to do test work for me as I was developing projects. And in that process, I had lots of issues where they weren't really delivering on time. There were issues, couldn't get a sense of when I needed test work done. And so in that process, I decided, how can I help them, if I'm their customer, be more successful in giving me what I need to execute my project successfully? And so I started by interviewing the test team, specifically the leaders that were doing the scheduling, the management, working with them, not in an adversarial way, but in a calm and methodical way. How do you make decisions? How do you decide what tests go where? How do you do these different things? In that process, I was able to understand their process flow, their business flow, where a lot of their gaps were, where it was challenging for them to make decisions, where were the time sinks and the things that they were doing. And this was really instrumental in understanding their business and their challenges. And then I took that and went off and worked for a period of time. We actually developed some custom software. Most of this was done as a support to them and started with a very simple prototype and then worked with them to test that prototype, to actually manage the schedules and automate a lot of the processes and the decisions that were really holding them back. And this also created the opportunity to see the challenges they were going to have ahead of time, because they could start forecasting and anticipating the challenges rather than having them just come upon them and having to be reactive. They could now be proactive. So in that process, that actually created the opportunity for me to go lead the test team. As I was leading the test team, we were able to revise, extend, and improve to not only be managing their process and scheduling, but actually doing a whole business process realignment. How the group was structured, the work each person did, how they did that work, how consistent that work was. And through the process of evaluating their current system, what each person did, what they liked about their jobs, what they didn't like about their jobs, we were able to start doing experiments. We knew that there were problems in the business. We needed to make some adjustments, and we had some ideas. So we developed a process where we could test a specific business process compared to the old business process. And so we actually did a whole value process map, not in the more formal way that you would see them, but in real time, where we were looking at problems, addressing what we could do, and doing tests to see what worked and what didn't to move the needle. In the end, through this process over the course of about 6 to 8 months, we were able to triple the output of the test lab. We went from daily average functional tests running of about 30% to being up closer to 70 and 80%. And it was significant because it was multifaceted. It was mentoring and training and really helping engineers be successful. It was giving them the right tools and the right training and the right organizational structure, and then it was automating wherever possible. I think the most significant outcome was they did have one person that it took a whole week to do a schedule plan for the next week. Through the adjustments we made, we got it down to about 90 minutes once a week. So just think about how many times improvement in output that specific engineer got and how much time they got back to do more interesting things and add more value to the business. That's what we do when we talk about business process improvement. We can take that same process and have multiple times already in different businesses and clients. In that process, we've had very similar results, significant improvements and increases in output while the costs go down. That's probably the most important thing. Your costs can go down at the same time your output goes up. It's a double win. And that's the kind of value that ATG brings. One of the challenges when you do business process improvement is people get concerned about looking bad. One of the challenges always is when you come in that, okay, here's a situation, it needs to be cleaned up. The people that are already in place, especially the full-time employees that are there that are maybe in charge, are going to be pretty sensitive to any kind of outside person coming in and influencing what they're doing and maybe potentially causing them to lose their job. That's not the approach we take. When ATG comes in, we work with people to help them make the changes so that they get the credit, so that they make the structural changes in how they do work, so you get a better employee out of the experience. I think oftentimes when you look at how these things get to be like this is eventually what happens is as things degrade, as leadership changes, a lot of times people get stuck in a status quo and they get in a very defensive situation where maybe they're not thinking creatively, maybe they don't feel empowered to make the changes, and so they try to brute force their way through solutions, and they require more of a strategic thinking approach to solve these problems. Oftentimes, the people in these roles may have come up through other parts of the organization and may not understand that specific business. They may have never been trained in business process. They may have not gotten much training as a manager or leader. They don't have the experience to think about, how do I really change this business? How do I get to the output I want? A lot of it comes to just training and experience. It's never a situation where someone is incapable. Many times, once you open the door and they see it, they're able to fix those things themselves. After we come in and do this process, they are able to do the same thing. When problems come up, they take the approach, we help them learn and apply it, and we're not needed. That's a great win when you think about mentorship, helping your managers become better leaders, helping them solve problems in a much more strategic way. One of the things about this process is there's unintended benefits, unintended consequences, and oftentimes people focus on the things they don't like rather than the things that are really great. So anytime that there's change management in an organization, it can be difficult for people because they don't like a change from the status quo. Usually the results are significant enough that can be overcome. A good example is if we look at the way the tests were running for previous programs, you might get to production and not all the tests are completed, or the second test needs to be done, other things need to happen. So you have to make other decisions, do other testing in full vehicle or things of that nature. The one thing that was interesting was when we got done with this process and we went through the next round of programs, there were no tests that didn't get done. Nothing was left behind. In fact, we were able to be more proactive in testing and actually did 20% more testing and had significant improvements in reliability. And in the end, our first pass yield for the product when it went to market was transformatively different at a critical time in the business and what we were trying to do with customer satisfaction. So it was really a great case that it wasn't very easily seen because it was in the background, but because we could deliver that higher performance, we actually delivered the higher quality that the customer had been asking for and had been looking for. And that's really the benefit of this.
If you're seeking expert engineering support and insights, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to stay updated with our latest innovations and services.